Yeah.
I want to start, though, with the news of the day and Adam Peters, because the league meetings are taking place, the owners' meetings down at the Breakers. We were just in West Palm.
We were just there.
If we extended our stay just a week or two, we could have been there for the owners' meetings, because we were about 10 minutes from the Breakers where we were hanging out. It was a good time. Such a beautiful place. That entire palm tree-laden, sunny. Like, West Palm's a little bit complicated because block to block, you don't really know what you're getting into.
It's a bit of a coin toss. You know what I mean? You're not really sure. It's a roll of the dice at certain blocks. And then the next thing you're going, this is immaculate.
But West Palm Beach, the site of the NFL owners' meetings, we've got a lot to get into on the owners' meetings front, but I want to start with some of the Adam Peters content today. So let's begin with what Peters said about Jayden Daniels being a recruiting tool. This was Peters with Kay Adams on her show on FanDuel.
How big of a recruiting tool is Jayden Daniels? Because from my perspective, as just a fan and someone who talks to players on television, they all love him.
Yeah.
They all want to play with him. Like, how key is he?
It's huge. It's huge. It was like last year when we hired DQ. All these players wanted to go play for him. Yeah. All these coaches wanted to go coach with them. And now getting a great quarterback like Jayden, a great young quarterback who's not just a great quarterback, but a great person that people want to be around, that people want to play with.
Slam dunk.
And that's great. So you get a guy like Debo because of that. You get a guy like LT because of that want to come and play for us. So it makes our jobs a lot easier.
So I wonder, how much of those two guys being in Washington is Daniels related? Clearly, they're more excited to be here because Jayden Daniels is the quarterback. But if Daniels is not the QB, they don't trade for Laramie Tunsil. Does he somehow stop that trade? I don't really believe that. The Deebo Samuel one's interesting because there was a market there for him where it seemed like a couple teams were curious about his availability. And specific to just Deebo again, I think Samuel had some say in where he was going to end up because he was going to be an agitator and kind of dictate some terms with San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So I'm more inclined to say when he comes out and tells you, I really like Jayden Daniels because I started watching him because Brandon Ayuk's his best buddy. And if Brandon Ayuk's his boy and Brandon Ayuk's my boy, then we're going to get together just fine. But the Tunsil thing, I don't think has anything to do with anything.
So I think that you could parse apart each individual person or signing that comes here and say, well, that's not totally Jayden Daniels. And I think people will dismiss that the entirety for part of it. The big theme is correct. Like, in other words, this is such a net positive that it's not the only reason Deebo Samuel's here. Washington traded for him. They wanted him. They're going to give him some guaranteed money. They converted his whatever. It's a good situation for him to thrive. It's not the only reason Laramie Tunsil's here. It's not the only reason Bobby Wagner signed here in Washington was that he likes Dan Quinn. It's not the only reason they were able to get Austin Eckler because Anthony Lynn on the coaching staff. But the point is, you keep doing that enough times, you win some of those, right? You're not just the team that has to pay the loser tax anymore. You could go market value and it could be a tipping point. All of these things are so overwhelmingly positive that's the big takeaway. So you're 100% right. I agree with you. I don't know that Laramie Tunsil would have gone, like if this was, Tampa for some reason needed the trade for him. I don't think it would have gone, no, I don't see it. I'm only going to play with Jayden Daniels.
Also, unless I'm not remembering something, I don't think he had a no trade clause. Like a team calls the Texans say okay, and now you're going to Washington. Where the Jayden Daniels element is in play, and it is a reality, in my opinion. He is a guy that everyone's going to want to play with, and you've got one of the cool kids, and he is going to be a recruiting tool. It's all true. I just think it's more in free agency. When you're courting a receiver, and we didn't really see them go out and sign a quality receiver this offseason. They kept Noah Brown internally. They brought in Michael Gallup externally, who didn't have much of a market, I wouldn't imagine, and the ties to Dan Quinn were probably a factor there. But that's where it's going to happen. When two teams want an offensive tackle at right tackle to replace Andrew Wiley next offseason, and it's Washington and someone else, and that tackle goes, I'll take $1 million less, but I'm going to play with Jayden Daniels to try to get the Commanders over the top. That's when you can sell me on the Daniels got it done. Mm-hmm. But when you just picked up the phone and called the Texans about Laramie Tunsil, I'm not so sure. But the point is the point, and the point is true. They do have a recruiting weapon at quarterback for the first time in probably my lifetime. I mean, I guess it's possible that after the 99 season, someone wanted to play with Brad Johnson, but Dan had him benched 2 weeks into the next year. So I don't know what that guy was thinking if he came over here to play with Brad.
Seriously.
They just haven't had it, man, and they do now.
Like, you wonder if maybe Griffin had some of that rep going, but with the injury and the way that thing ended, it didn't turn out like this. I mean, I took one of the worst franchises in the sport to the NFC title game in year one. That cologne smells sweet right now.
Dan Quinn is also a bit of a recruiting weapon.
Yep.
That has been proven to be the case. For all of my issues with the overall philosophy of the defensive-minded head coach, what they banked on and were 1,000% right about was that he is so beloved around the league that he would be able to put together a great staff. And then he and that staff would then become recruiting assets. And that totally happened, whether it's Bobby Wagner wanting to come play for his linebackers coach, Ken Norton Jr., a former great player, or Austin Eckler wanting to come here because Anthony Lynn had coached him in LA. And we could do 10 of those. I mean, there are examples all over the roster from last year, from this year. I just mentioned Gallup, who's got ties to a bunch of the people in the building because of the Cowboys. He is now a cowmander, so to speak. So, yeah, they definitely do have some well-liked, successful people. And it's good to be popular. It is good to be in a place where people want to come to this building to work with you. The other thing that Adam Peters talked about today that I thought was really significant was we got an answer for him about trading draft capital to acquire veterans, because the philosophy that he has discussed, he's made it very, very clear. He is a guy that wants to build through the draft as a GM. He said it over and over and over again. But the moves that they keep making over and over and over again are trades for veterans where they give up picks, which I have not had a problem with. But I know a lot of people have a hard time juxtaposing those two things. You can't tell me in one hand that you don't drink soda. And then in the other hand,
you're holding a cup of soda.
Get a case of Coca-Cola Zero from Wegmans, right? My point is you can have your cake and eat it too. Doesn't mean you're going to drink the soda. Both can be okay. Maybe I'm bringing it home for my wife. You don't know. Don't judge me, right? This is what Adam Peters had to say about draft capital being given up in mass this offseason.
You take each opportunity as they come, right? And so understanding where, we were able to get really good players at really good, important positions, there's give and take to that, right? And so we did pick 9 players last year. I think they all made the team, right? And then we had 2 rookie free agents make the team as well. So we have 5 picks this year. We could have more, depending on what happens. So we do. It's almost a full complement both years. Obviously, you do want to build through the draft. I feel that all the time. But understanding when you can get, a premier corner, a premier receiver, a premier left tackle, those are things you have to really look into. And we just felt that was the best move for us.
So that's a really interesting way to think about this that I have not considered. We'll get back to the idea of pitting the two against one another, building through the draft and all the trades they're making where they give up picks. But the math that he just used, if you notice, that was kind of a subtle thing. He goes, we had a full allotment of picks. They all made the team, right? Everyone goes, yeah. So that's 9 guys. We had 2 free agents that we didn't draft make the team, right? Yeah. Okay. That's 11 guys. And then he didn't spell it out this way, but I think this is what he was suggesting. We're going to make another 6 picks, maybe more, but as of right now, another 6 picks, 5 picks this draft. So let's say it's 15, 16 picks. That's if they don't trade back. How many picks do you get to start a draft every year?
7.
Okay.
Right before you start doing
times 2. How many? If you have 2 full draft classes, how many players do you add over 2 years?
14.
He's saying we'll have 15 or 16 even if we don't trade back, basically, is what he's suggesting. So he said we'll have 2 drafts worth of players. Now, I don't think that's apples to apples because respectfully,
that's some colorful accounting.
Yeah, when you are going with 2 undrafted free agents last year, and then of your 5 picks this year, 2 are going to be effectively 7th round picks. Having 6 7th rounders is not the same as having a pick in every single round 1 through 6. So the accounting that he's doing doesn't work that well.
Yeah, and even I'm making up a name. One of the undrafted free agents. I don't know. Name your guy, whoever did. Is he guaranteed to make it year over year? You're probably trying to do better than that guy with a roster that you're inheriting that was devoid of talent.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? So there's no guarantee that the 7th rounder that cracked the squad last year is still there. I mean, obviously on an individual basis, you feel for that guy, but that's life at the fringe part of the league. So I understand what he's doing. He's offering a different perspective, and there is some merit to that. I mean, to me, the thing that you could say, and he's smarter than me, he knows what he's doing, is we all have the same amount of allotment capital, and all we're doing is pulling different levers to make the football team better. So I know they have this desperation to hold on to we're building through the draft. I promise that's what we're doing. You could totally say we saw great opportunities to make the football team better, and he did that to a degree.
Yeah, I think that's what he said.
But Sometimes it's salary cap. Sometimes we use a draft pick to not just in the conventional way, which is the draft a 21-year-old. Sometimes we have a more proven commodity.
Well, here's the quiet part that he can't say out loud. There is no young talent on this team that we inherited.
And that's it.
We don't have players developing that will become household names or stars. And because we'll get those guys, asset we really have to do that right now, to do it quickly anyway, because you could do it in free agency, but now you're just picking through who's available, is to trade. So I think it is true that he could both be draft first, free agency, and trade second, and also have been way more aggressive on the trade market early as a general manager than maybe in a perfect world he'd like to. Because his number one goal is to win football games. His number two goal is probably to be true to his cultural philosophy. And maybe someone would argue with that. Like, I read the book that Bill Walsh wrote, The Score Will Take Care of Itself. And I guarantee you he would argue with that. He would say, no. The number one thing you do is lay out basically your morals as a coach, your foundational philosophies and your paradigms. You stick to those, and everything else will eventually happen. Winning does not supersede that. You cannot bend to win. But I think Peters has shown he will bend a bit here on this philosophy, or that he's writing it in pencil, not pen. And if you want to scream it into a megaphone for everyone to hear, because it's a nice thing to say, we're going to build through the draft, we're going to go get the kids in the draft, then you could do some funny accounting, which I think is what he's kind of doing.
Right.
Hey, I'm giving you 2 draft classes over 2 years. We're going to have 16, 17 players. He also hinted at the possibility they could absolutely trade back, which I think is almost a lock at this point.
Yeah, I think it's offer dependent, but yeah, I think that's the plan going in, right?
Imagine if they move back twice, and now you've got a few third-round picks and a couple of fourth-round picks. They're going to have a sizable draft class to add to this. Maybe it's devoid of the star in the next year or two, unless you hit a real home run that nobody sees coming. But I think the quantity is what he's talking about more than the quality. Like, look at all these players. We only have 53 spots. We're going to have 16 or 17 of them that we've brought in 2 draft classes, basically. Which I understand that thinking. I wouldn't even try to explain it away, though. I don't think you have to waste your time with that. I know there's a fan somewhere that needs to hear it because they just want to know that you care about the draft so much. And I'm probably the opposite, where I'm wearing the Bleep Them Pick shirt. But I think all you have to say is it is really hard in this league to get a top 5 left tackle. And I got one for you this offseason. Jayden will benefit from it. It's really hard in this league to have a great cornerback. And while I'm not so sure that they have one, at this point, they think they do. The cornerback that they need to be great, they had to trade some picks.
Yeah, because you end up having to sort of knock the free agent market and the guys that are in it. But the between the lines reading is, guys, just look at who's in free agency. Now, cornerback was different this year. There was actually some players that I thought were difference makers. And again, I'm as expert as anybody else that reads the articles that you guys can read. But you know what I mean? Like, there were some names where you go, hey, at a pretty decent cost, DJ Reed could help you, and you can kind of go down your list. Carlton Davis from Detroit and a few others. There were no premium pass rushers. There were no premium left tackles. Like last year, their best left tackle was Tyron Smith, who was 38 years old, who took up a few $million to go try to win one more time. Premium position players at the most important spots, tackle is one of them, are simply not available via conventional means. And now, if you want one, you're probably going to have to draft in the top half of the first round to get a guy that, again, guys emerge all the time, whether it's a second rounder or somebody in the mid rounds that turns out to be a star left tackle, whatever. But the point is, through conventional means, these guys are not available. We have to do unconventional. You end up running down the free agent market. He doesn't want to do that. He's too nice of a guy trying to treat people well. But that's the between the line subtext here is there isn't anybody good via normal means.
My job is to protect Jayden Daniels, people. I went and got Laramie Tunsil to do that. You're going to have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because whoever I was drafting at 29 and beyond was not going to be Laramie Tunsil early on. And I'm trying to make sure that Jayden Daniels plays 17 games. Because if that happens, you got a chance to win 12 of them every single year, probably. And I think that's where his thinking is right now. He did, as I mentioned, at least hint at the possibility of trading back when he talked about adding more picks. This was Adam Peters meeting today at the owners' meetings with the local media on the potential of draft day trades.
That's certainly something that we'll consider. We'll consider everything, trading up, trading down. We always do. With trading down, you have to have somebody who wants to trade up, and so I always say, like, I'd love to trade down all the time, but it has to be somebody else that wants to trade up, and it has to be the right deal. And how far do you want to go back, and all those different things you take into account. Who's there on the board, right? Is there just one player on the board that you want? And if that's the case, then maybe you think twice about trading back, because but if you have 5 players on the board that you really like, you can trade back a few picks, and then you can just pick one of those. And I think, with what we did in free agency and through the trades, we have the optionality to really do anything at 29, which we feel really good about.
Until he said 29, Darius could have been playing a clip from 1 year earlier.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of Adam Peters, who's great as a GM. He says very little, and he gives you almost nothing. He kind of talks in a bigger picture way. Hey, do you guys think this year you could be a candidate to trade back? And he'll tell you, we'd always like to trade back, but it takes this. I like that he gives very little. They operate in the shadows. No one really ever knows what they're doing. The Laramie Tunsil deal happens, and not a single person has linked them to Houston or Tunsil at any point. I like how he operates in that regard. But I would bet on them trading back, because I think at 29, you're deep enough in the first round, just a couple of picks from the end of that round, where someone's willing to come up to get that extra year of whatever player they draft. If it's an edge, if it's a tackle, if it's a receiver, I doubt it's a quarterback, but I guess it could be. I think Lamar Jackson, it was the last pick of the first round by Baltimore. The Ravens went up. They weren't sold on him. Nobody knew he was about to be a multi-time MVP at all. But the Ravens said, well, if we're taking a QB, let's make sure we get him in round 1 rather than a handful of picks from now, because we get the 5th-year option and we extend the window of him being cheap, basically. You could do that at every single position. So that's why I think at 29, it is actually a pretty good range to possibly try to move back a few slots.
I think it is too. And the scenario that I could see, just sort of playing that out, is if there's one of these premium spots where they still have a pretty glaring hole. Thinking about a defensive end, whether it's Mike Green from Marshall, or you could pick your guy James Pierce from Tennessee, that they love and doesn't go where they think he's going to go. Like they got him pegged. He's going to, I'm making this up, he's going to,
if they think he's going 14th overall.
Yeah, he's going to Miami at 17. I don't even know if that's their pick, but like he's going there. And it doesn't happen. You go, actually, we don't really need to trade back. We'll just do this. But I think probably if it plays out the way that they think it's going to, they'll go, we're probably better off, instead of just picking the next defensive end on the list. If there's a drop off in our minds, we'll go back and, it be in the mid-second rounds, probably maybe pick up a 3rd rounder this year or the like. We're not going to get a king's ransom for 29, but we'll get a nice haul. And that nice haul is worth more to us and on a roster that just needs positive bodies at this point than where they are.